right.
Yeah, Perci's.
Yes, I see that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm used to muting myself in these situations.
Everybody else
and I
is
couldn't
good.
undo it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Are we all good now? Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
I think so.
Well, everyone, we just want to welcome you and thank you again for taking the time out of your schedules to participate in what we feel is a very important program as we continue to discuss the discussion on race in Tuscarawas County. So just in case there are some of you here tonight who weren't able to attend the first panel discussion, I'm just going to give you a little background on why the library felt it was very important to present this program. The panel discussions were planned by the library's diversity committee with the goal of providing the community with an opportunity to hear what it was like to grow up in or near Tuscarawas County from people of color, from different walks of life with varied life experiences. Each of our panelists have either currently live in or grew up in or near Tuscarawas County. During the previous discussion, we provided an opportunity for attendees to submit questions for our panelists during the registration process, and so many of you responded with some wonderful questions. Unfortunately, we were only able to get through 3 of those questions. So tonight, we will continue the conversation with the unasked questions. However, we will be using a different format in an attempt to have all the questions, or as many as possible, answered. So we've allotted 2 hours for tonight's program. As before, as you can see, only the moderator and the panelists will have their mics and cameras turned on. The moderator will pose a question to each panelist, and they will have 2 minutes to respond. But we have assured them that we will not kill their mics if they go over a little bit. So the panelists will have an opportunity to openly discuss the replies with each other afterwards. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a little white chat box. Please type in any questions that you have in the chat box. Be sure that you specify if you're addressing questions to a specific panelist. Otherwise, we'll just assume it's for anyone to answer. We will be monitoring the chat box, and we'll do our best to make sure that your questions are all answered. The program is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. Also, the link to the library's social justice resources site, I'm not sure if it's in the chat box, but if it's not, you can find it on the library's website at www.tusklibrary.org under Find Information. And you'll find additional resources on the topics of race and social justice there. So at this time, I'm going to introduce you once again to our distinguished panelists. I will make note that unfortunately, Yulisa Velasquez wasn't able to be with us tonight. She's returned to school and she felt like she needed to focus her attention on her studies. So her contribution to the discussion will be greatly missed, but we do understand and we're very thankful that she was able to participate with us in the first discussion. So first up is Chynna Presley. Chynna Presley is a social worker with over 10 years of experience working with individuals, families, and youth in her community. She graduated from New Philadelphia High School in 2003 and went on to pursue a Bachelor of Social Work degree from Huntington University in Indiana. In the fall of 2018, Chynna obtained her master's in organizational leadership. Over the years, she's had the opportunity to work as a foster care case manager, a community educator, a program director and curriculum developer, a stay-at-home mother, and a nonprofit supervisor. Today, Chynna serves as the Director of Intercultural Enrichment at her alma mater, Huntington University. Perci Garner is a former professional baseball player who played college baseball and football at Ball State before being drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies in the 2nd round of the 2010 Major League Baseball draft. Perci's dream came full circle when he took the mound for the Cleveland Indians during the 2016 season when the Tribe fell 1 game short of a World Series championship. Now he takes all of what he learned on the field and what he is currently learning off the field, and he shares it with the world. Rex Ray graduated from Dover High School in 1960. He retired as a colonel in 1977 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. Rex served 30 years in Thailand, Turkey, Greece, Ethiopia, Spain, and Germany. His decorations and recognitions include the Legion of Merit and Meritorious Service Medals, Outstanding Young Man of America, and Who's Who Among Black Americans. He is a retired adjunct professor at Park University and a career coach with Lee Hecht Harrison Incorporated. Rex is also a published author, professional speaker, and spokesperson. He has been featured in TV and radio awareness interviews, such as for prostate cancer support groups and the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team. He's the National Director for Kent State University Alumni Association. Rex earned a BBA at Kent State University and an MPA at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He is also an actor, a model, and an avid golfer. Tonight's moderator is Nicole Willey. Nicole Willey is Professor of English at Kent State University Tuscarawas, where she teaches a variety of literature and writing courses and serves as Mentoring Program Coordinator for KSU Tuscarawas. Her research interests include mothering, masculinities, memoir, pedagogy, mentoring, 19th century American literature, and slave narratives. She authored Creating a New Ideal of Masculinity for American Men, the Achievement of Sentimental Women Writers in the Mid-19th Century, and co-edited the collections Motherhood Memoirs, Mothers Creating Writing Lives, and Feminist Fathering, Fathering Feminists, New Definitions and Directions. Nicole lives in New Philadelphia, Ohio, with her husband and 2 sons. So before turning the program over to Nicole, I'd like to share the comment that I shared at the beginning of the previous panel discussion. I heard this statement while I was attending another virtual discussion on race, and I believe it is very relevant for us to keep in mind during tonight's program. Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, the author of the book Stamped from the Beginning, stated that people of color have bought into the lie that if I'm Black, I'm an expert on Blackness, because white people come up to me thinking that I represent the race, asking me to tell them about Black people. I ask that you please remember our panelists tonight are not experts on Blackness or brownness or racism or on Black people or brown people as a whole, but they are experts on their own experiences and how they were each affected or impacted by them. So we'd like to thank all of our panelists once again for being willing to participate in tonight's discussion panel. And we thank you, Nicole, for agreeing to be our moderator. So without further comments, I will now turn the discussion over to Nicole and our panelists.
Thank you so much, Virginia. It's a real pleasure to be here again with Chynna and Rex and Perci. And I want to hear their words, not mine. So I'm going to jump right into the questions. And I'm going to start with one that it's not an easy question, but maybe we can think of it as a little bit of a warm-up. And so the first question is, what do you think white people need to know about race? And would what they need to know or that message differ for adults and children?
You want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Perci.
Well, what I think, I guess white people need to know about race is for the, I guess the younger crowd is maybe we don't need to focus on, I guess the different races growing up. I think the word race is a little bit maybe out of the box what it needs. I think of us as all one human race. And, maybe there's different ethnic backgrounds. Maybe people do something different, have different traditions and stuff like that. But when it comes to race and racism, I think maybe it's okay to teach about what happened in the past, but kind of look forward in the future where, racism really isn't, I guess, a word that is a part of our vocabulary. Just like there's other words that we've kind of focused on banishing from our vocabulary. Obviously, they're still used, but the most part, taking them out of the vocabulary, I think, can help and go a long way with our children and just being able to accept people, because I believe children are taught these things, and if it's never brought up, then You know, hey, they'll know that kid's brown, but they'll know he likes video games and math just like they do. And for adults, I just think moving forward, race should be something that you kind of embrace in your adult circles, in your conversations. I think should be something that we don't focus on the differences as much as we have in the past. And I think stereotypes should be kind of taken off the table as well, because not everybody's the same. Not every Black person acts the same. Not every white person acts the same. So moving forward, let's just look at it from that point of view.
Thank you, Percy. Chynna, what did you want to say?
I was just going to agree with the comment about, the human race. I actually just posted a video for my job yesterday. I think a lot of times we think about race as a way to divide us, when race really is, and we are, like Percy said, we're all a part of the human race. Ethnicity is about the culture that we come from. It's our cultural background. Our ethnicity is more tied up into the people that we are a part of, and the culture that we are a part of, or what the culture that makes us who we are, or at least the background of where we come from. And so what I think is important I'll keep it short, but what I think is important to know about race is that it is used way too often to divide. And instead, if we remember that we're all part of one race, the human race, that is the one thing that should be tying us all together.
Did we lose Rex?
Unfortunately, we do seem to have lost Rex's connection, and I hope that he is able to come in shortly here for sure. But since he's not here, that does give a little bit more time if you two wanted to kind of bounce ideas off each other. I am interested, especially in, this idea about the way we talk about race, what white people should know about if we shouldn't talk about race, when it's appropriate, how to do it, but how that is different for adults and for children. And Percy kind of started to talk a little bit, I think, about maybe adult circles could embrace those conversations, and maybe children maybe less, I think is what I was hearing you saying. So I was just curious what you would recommend.
Yeah, and I didn't see your the stuff you posted, Chynna. I didn't want to steal your.
Oh no, you wouldn't have seen it. It was a devotional for the student body. So
Okay. So that's proof. All right, good. You got me. But yeah, I think it's just something that there's a lot of things that we discuss as adults that we don't necessarily share with children. And yeah, most of those things we do kind of bring it up as they get older. But I've already seen the shift from, when my dad was probably my age, and how, race was talked about, or, and I know people can look at it from a different standpoint and say, well, it wasn't talked about much, but, and they think that was maybe something that led to it being more like, I equate it to, like, if you think about the yips with golfers or something like that, that's the unforced, forspoken stuff. You don't want to talk about that, because it's kind of a stigma. And I don't think race is a stigma, especially over the last few years and how much we've been talking about it. I think it's okay to have conversations about learning points, maybe about your culture. And I think it relates to culture more than just your race, because the point I was trying to make is, we're all different people, no matter what, color we are. But we also are the same in a lot of ways as well. And I think if we focus on things, likes that we share with another human, and we find common ground there, I think relational aspects of race will be kind of eliminated. People just will be focusing on, hey, I like the Browns, or arguing, I like the Steelers. But I don't think we have to agree on everything. But at the same time, I think if we focus on things that we can, just be better at as humans, and focus on a common goal, just like if you see in sports, there's not too many. I'm trying to speak for, I guess, my experiences. I'm assuming Chynna and her locker room experiences playing sports, that there was a common goal. So the differences in race probably weren't even brought up for the most part. You guys were just thinking about winning the game, getting better as a team, and listening to the coach's philosophies.
Yeah, I think I have a different viewpoint on that. Like, yes, obviously on the team, we're all one. And that's one of the things I loved about playing sports, that we all have this common goal. And at that moment, it doesn't matter to me who you are, where you came from, anything. We just know that we need to work together to achieve this common goal. I love that. And I love this picture of, you sound very much like Obama when you say, Perci, when you're talking about, we all just need to come together. He was a dreamer, right? And that was a wonderful thing that tied a lot of us to him, is this idea that maybe we could all feel like we're a part of one unit, and we can work together toward a common goal. Unfortunately, in my short 35 years on this life, or on this earth, as much as I want to believe that everybody has this common goal, too often I've found that everyone doesn't. And so that's the reason why I have the job I have, right? I'm the director of intercultural enrichment on a small private white campus, and constantly trying to coach staff and students and faculty on how to have conversations surrounding race in a way that is not harmful, in a way that can heal, in a way that can educate, in a way that can bring us all together in some common form, right? But it seems that it doesn't matter how many generations we try to do this with, it just never ends. We still have these conversations. We're still seeing the hatred. We're still seeing, and even some self-hatred. I think if we think about the history, the roots of our country are literally rotting in racial inequity and racial divide and injustice. And we cannot erase that. We literally have to go back and change the soil in order for us to replant the roots of this country. And I don't know that we could ever do that. Not to sound negative, but to be realistic. And the fact that I don't know that I have been in a circle yet where everybody has this common goal of, we're all good, it's okay. I maybe a few circles here and there, but it's very different. It's very rare to find. And so I approach conversations with people in a way that I was just telling a student today, instead of having an argument with that parent that thinks that way, instead of approaching that conversation with emotion, why don't you take a step back and prepare yourself to ask questions? Because the way that your parent grew up, the way that that person grew up, or the messages that they heard are very different than the messages that you're hearing now. And so gain an understanding, and all you're getting, gain an understanding, right? And so if you can gain an understanding of where these people are coming from, why they believe the things that they believe, then we can have another conversation around, okay, now this makes a little bit more sense. I can appreciate and I can understand where you're coming from. I may not agree with it, because I don't think we will ever get to a place where we all agree. But I do think that we can get to a place where we can start to understand, and we can foster and nurture this, this belief that we don't have to agree, we don't have to like what the other person says, but we can understand it because we took the time to believe that that person is also human, and that person also has a growth journey that they've been on. And instead of denying them, their right to the life that they have lived, I'm going to go ahead and let you know, I accept it. I accept who you are. I accept where you've come from. And I accept that your understanding of the world, your knowledge of the world is different than mine. So where can we come together in there?
I like that. Well put.
So I feel like that really is a great lead in to one of the other popular questions here. You know, part of the reason that we have these different experiences, I think, is because, unfortunately, racism, systemic racism, and white supremacy do exist in our country, as you know, as you were talking about the roots. And so someone wants to know, what does this audience, what do the people here today need to know about white supremacy and systemic racism? I know it's a big one. That's a big one.
Well, just for me, I know there are people that kind of look at racism and white supremacy as a myth that has yet to be on the episode of Mythbusters. But I'm here to tell them today that it is real. We may have made some progress, but we're nowhere near, as a people. It's important to know, yes, times are a little bit different. We can vote for the most part. We feel in most areas, and it's not like it was 70 years ago. But on the same,
Excuse me. I'm sorry, yeah. Percy, I'm sorry. Your mic is, I don't know if it's coming across with everybody, but it's going in and out. And you are saying some good stuff, and I don't want us to miss it. So I don't know if it's on your end, but can you try to see if you can clear that up? Because I really want to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it's probably on my end here.
Okay.
Thank you, Virginia. Okay. I was not sure if that was just me, or if that was happening. I could make it out, but it was not
perfect. Okay, let me change mics real quick. I appreciate
Just back up and say what you said before.
Repeat it all, Percy. Repeat it all.
Do I sound better now?
Oh, yes. That's really good.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't want to go all expensive mic on you guys, but
sounds good though.
Thank you. So, I mean, I guess basically to piggyback off of what I was saying, if I can remember correctly, I basically, the idea of what I was trying to say is, as a people, we have made some progress. But I would say if we were to use an analogy of sports, because that's pretty much a lot of my background, is if we look at a football field or a baseball diamond, we're on a football field. We've came from maybe the 1 yard line 80 years ago and beyond back to maybe we're at the 20 or 30 yard line. We haven't made it across midfield, and I think that we've got a lot of progress to go. And I agree with Chynna, what she said. I don't know if we're ever all going to agree. But the thing that I've made a point in my life is the people I come across to, like in baseball or anything, when I would talk about religion or anything that people disagree on, they know that they can come to me and I guess have an open debate, not an argument, where both parties are not, it doesn't result in screaming and an event that everybody's gonna be like, whoa, this is not good. As a Christian and someone that I want to, be an example for Jesus on this earth, that just can't happen on my part. So I think the goal should be not to agree on everything. The goal should be to get to that point where we can just have some type of, empathy where we can put ourselves in other people's shoes and may not say, you know what, I'll probably never be able to imagine or be able to know exactly how you feel, but I can see where you come from and I see why you feel the way you feel. Obviously, I don't agree with that, but that's not going to be the end all be all. And I'm never going to, I guess, conversate or share a space with you just because we have different beliefs. Now, I want to make sure that I'm answering the question. what was asked.
So yeah, it was to, what do you think this audience needs to know about systemic racism and white supremacy? And you did start with it's real. So even if people want to deny it.
Yeah. And I understand where they're coming from though, because back to, going off of what I, practicing what I just said, is we have to understand where people are coming from. Now, growing up, most people in this area, white people, of course, racism would not seem real to them because they never experienced it. But for people of color, obviously the experience has been different. And I think empathy is a skill that you might eventually can learn if you want to. Just like anything, if you want to stop a bad habit, you have to want to. And I think the want to be on the same level as another human requires empathy and putting yourself in their shoes. And I think it's just starting with changing your mindset and wanting to accept people and going from there.
Okay, thank you. So Chynna, what would you like to say about systemic racism and white supremacy to this audience?
So I agree with Perci. We have to acknowledge that it's real. It's very easy if you are, and I think we touched on this a little bit, but if you are born with a certain privilege, you don't have to face these injustices or inequities. And so just to kind of define, I think sometimes those are broad terms that get thrown around that people don't truly understand what they mean. So systemic racism is the idea that even though we have these laws and such that are supposed to be for all people, remembering that if you go back to when the Constitution was birthed, we had this, they put the phrase, and the founding fathers put this phrase in, that all men are created equal, right? So essentially that all these laws that we're putting into place are for all men. But you have to remember that at that time, that did not include women, and it also did not include people of color. That people of color were not considered human beings. We were treated as if we were no better than the cattle on the field. And that women were also not treated as equal as humans. And so we have, even though Perci has said, we've come a long way. We've broken down some of these inequities within our society, but we do have the way that we operate in our society. Socially, there are still inequities. There are still things that happen in our system, laws that are here in our system that work to continue to oppress people. Or, and I shouldn't even say, I don't even want to go as far as to say oppress, even though that is what it is, but this idea that we want you to feel equal, however, we don't want you to quite come up to where equal really means. And so and I don't think I shared this the last time, I hope I didn't. One of the ways I tried to describe this to my daughter-in-law, who is Croatian, and she's just now getting an understanding of she's trying to understand Black Lives Matter and all of these other things, that these are just brand new things to her. She grew up in a whole nother country. And so one of the things that I said was, let's talk about equity and understand what equity means. Let's say that we have a pizza pie, and we have this big old pizza pie, and it's cut into 8 slices. But the slices are not equal sizes. So we have some that are larger than others. And a white person in the room might have the large slice, okay? And then a Black person in the room might have a skinny slice. So the way that equality would say is, this is equal because we're both eating. We both have a meal. This is equality. What equity says is, the person with the skinny slice needs to have a second skinny slice to equal the size and the amount of the larger slice. The problem is that we live in a system that says, no, I don't want you to have 2 slices because that looks like you have more than me. I want us to stay where it's equal and we're both eating. Don't complain because we gave you equality. Stop complaining. You have equality. When all people who are in marginalized groups are saying is, I understand that I'm eating, but I'm still hungry. I would like the same amount that you have. Is that okay, please? That's all we want. I'm not trying to get more. I'm not trying to take the whole pie. I just want the same amount. But we live in a system that does not allow that.
I'm going to
Well
interrupt
well
for
put.
just a second. I'm sorry, Percy. I did not mean to do this to you. Rex, welcome back. We're glad you're back.
Well, thank you, and I apologize for that. My computer decided it wanted to do a configuration against my desire.
Of course, anybody who's worked with technology gets that.
Yeah.
I just want to take a minute.
More than I have to, although my sons tell me I should do more. But I'm glad to be back. So.
Well, we're glad you're back. And I just want to take a minute to speak to our audience. Please remember, if you have a question that you'd like to ask the panelists, please type it in the little chat box at the bottom of your screen. Thank you.
Well, we sure are glad that Rex was able to make it back with us. And we won't go back to the very beginning, but Rex, the question that Percy and Chynna just answered was, what does this audience need to know about white supremacy and systemic racism? It's a big one.
That's a tough question, and it's a broad question.
Mm-hmm.
But what they need to know is that in some people's minds, it does exist. Okay, that white supremacy exists, and systemic racism exists. And in fact, we can see sometimes, in fact, that it does exist, the way people are treated in our country. But in some people's minds, it doesn't exist. And so part of what we have to do is get people to understand some of the nuances of systemic racism and white supremacy. Now, to me, there should not be such a thing, but I've lived long enough to know that there is, and there are some folks who would differ with me on that. I know. But the point, here's the point I'd like to make, is that there are some things that occur throughout our living every day and throughout our lives and so forth, that people just sort of take for granted that it's okay to do, it's okay to say, and that others ought to be willing to go along with that because they meant no harm. You following me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because they meant no harm. But you have to be sensitive enough to others so that you know when you may have caused harm. Are you with me? Because this could go a lot of places, what I'm talking about, not just with racism, but with sexism, and other forms of insensitive behavior. So that's what I would like for the audience to know, is that learn how to become aware of what might be insensitive. And you can learn that. Some places it's taught, because in the Air Force and the military, we had what we called equal opportunity treatment, sensitivity training, those sorts of things. And so folks in leadership positions have to practice that and be cognizant of the fact that there are things that folks should be more sensitive to. And so that's what they need to know. And for anybody who's in a position of leadership or in a position to influence, and we all have some power to influence others. So it's important. Good manners is helpful. Treat your office worker the way you would want your mother to be treated, or your sister to be treated. Okay, you follow me? So that's very important for us to learn how to do that. Oftentimes that comes with the experience of rubbing up against each other. And I don't mean necessarily physically, but being in the presence of each other. That is, and where you can have a civil conversation to do that. And I don't want to try to make up for where I was gone, but I will say this. I had a conversation with a young man the other night. We walked in together into a little restaurant to get some food. And when we walked in together, our greetings were very, very concise to say, sort of like a nod and a hello. He was not a person of color, okay? But he made a comment to me about the pandemic and how he thought it ought to impact some people. And he wasn't necessarily talking about people of color, but he was just talking about in general. And I said, well, I wouldn't want to wish the pandemic on anyone. And so after we got inside, we didn't say anything for a while. And I had on one of my Air Force caps, and he finally said to me, he said, oh, I see you were in the Air Force. And I said, yeah. And he had served in the military also. So we got into a conversation. We found something in common. So we got into a conversation. And even after we left with our food, we stood outside and talked for maybe 7 or 8 minutes. And it was a good conversation. He found out that I knew people from the area that he knew. And then, of course, he asked me how old I was. I think he thought I was about his age, which was a compliment. But anyway, so when I told him, well, he told me how old his dad was. And so we talked about that some. But I think that was an enlightening moment for both of us. For him, in the sense that we could have this conversation and talk about this particular thing and about the comment that he had kind of made about the pandemic and, and folks who might get it or who might not get it. And leave there and wish each other well. Because when we first walked in together, I wasn't sure I really wanted to talk with him. You follow me? Yeah, because he wasn't really kind of open to conversation. And I'm pretty easy to get into conversation, but I'm also reluctant to have a conversation that's not going anywhere. But I think this one went somewhere, and I think we both took something away from it. And he's a part of the Valley. He grew up in the Valley here. He didn't grow up in Dover, but he grew up in the Valley. And it was a good conversation, and I hope our conversation has an impact on how people look at each other in our community. That's just one small start, but there could be many starts like that particular conversation. That makes sense to anybody?
Sure.
Yeah.
It did.
Okay.
Thank you
All
for
right.
that. So we have had now a question from the audience, and I think I'm understanding it correctly. So the audience member is saying, this is such an old subject, these problems that we're discussing of racism and treating other people differently because
About
of
400 years old.
who they look, how they look, where they're from, those kinds of things. And so the question is, what goes through someone's head when they decide that they could enslave someone? And then this person references, this goes clear back to, we see it in Egypt in the Bible, and of course we know that it is in our history. And so, so this idea, and I don't know, that to me, it's a really big question, and I don't know if anybody wanted to take that one on or not. What might allow one person or one group of people to believe that they could have that kind of power and just complete dehumanization of another group of people?
I'd like to tackle that one because for one, I think that's something that a question that we're all wondering, like how is this possible? But there are two resources that I'd like to throw out for people to take a look at. One is, I think it's called American History X, which is an old movie about white supremacy and a certain, the characters, I believe it, I can't remember. I don't want to say it's a true story. I can't remember for sure, but it's a very hard movie to watch, but it's very, very good to get into the mind of somebody who is entering into a white supremacist group. I think another good resource is you can go onto YouTube actually and look up the name Jane Elliott. And she's the one who did the brown eyes, blue eyes experiment a long time ago. And she still does some interviews here and there, but old white woman with a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge. So in order to kind of gain a better understanding of even how does this stuff even work? How does this even work on anybody? How do we even get there? I think those are two really good resources to start with. So I don't know that any of, I don't know, I'm gonna speak for myself. I don't know that I could specifically say what goes through somebody's mind. I think that in history, when you study certain leaders who have had an opportunity to lead people into such awful situations, right? A lot of times what they do is they start with fear mongering, and they make one ethnic group fear the other ethnic group by causing them to believe that they are lesser than for some reason or another. And as that fear continues to grow and the rhetoric around why that group does not deserve to have what they have and why that belongs to you and not to them, the emboldenedness comes out. I don't even know if that's a full word, but there becomes they begin to feel emboldened, an opportunity to take what they believe is theirs. And I think a lot of times it is perpetuated against a group of people who are deemed as accepting people. I think a lot of cultures that end up being taken advantage of, different ethnic groups that do get taken advantage of, are typically ones that welcome people or are a welcoming culture, a culture of people who care for others. And I think sometimes we don't, I don't even want to go as far back as to slavery right now in this answer, but just in general, I think a lot of times we have a lot of ethnic groups that are so, it's ingrained in them to be loving, to take care of one another as a human race. And then you get a wolf amongst the sheep, and they tend to terrorize the group, and tear it apart. And I think too, when you turn a group of people against each other, this idea of divide and conquer takes place. And so when you turn a group of people against each other, then you can also take advantage of them that way as well. I don't know what goes through somebody's mind other than I think that this idea of power and control and I want what you have and it's going to be mine no matter what comes into play. But I would love to hear what you two men have to say on this.
Whew.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I mean, just quickly for me, just because I don't know, because I come from that background, and the spirituality I have kind of just, okay, I want to say this. So how I've been brought up and the spirituality I have in church and in my faith kind of lends itself into being the opposite, like mindset. I want to help, I want to love, just like you were describing. But sometimes, especially in sport, those traits or mindsets are kind of sought after. Now, I'm not saying to humanize someone, but sometimes I do wish that I was a little bit more aggressive, a little bit, not as nice in certain aspects of my life, because it would benefit, me or my family. But that just goes to show how correct you are in your belief that some people are just a group of people. They're meant to be one way, and then some people kind of want to take advantage of that. And it's something that I don't think many people can understand. Even the people that are probably mixed in that belief system or mindset, I don't know if they can come out and say, well, this is why I'm this way. So it's pretty difficult, and it's something hopefully Rex can tackle, because I definitely can't.
Well, it is a tough one. And oftentimes I think it's driven by jealousy, being envious of what others have, and not so much what you have, but what they don't want you to have. Because there are, we all struggle at some point, except for those who are born in a great deal of wealth or whatever, they're born, saying born on third base or whatever you want to call it. But for all of us who are striving to get ahead, and I think we all inherently want to get ahead, want to do better for ourselves, for our loved ones, and so forth. But when some of us do tend to get ahead and the others don't come along with us, sometimes that's when that envy comes up. And you start to say, well, we really kind of got to stick together, because I don't know how, X got there and we didn't get there. That sort of thing. And so when you start to have folks get together because they feel like they have something in common that they're lacking, they find power in that. And so they want to take action to do something about it. And out of those kinds of emotional situations, there are groups that are born. The Ku Klux Klan after the Civil War, sort of pretty much born out of that, because, well, folks in the South had lost some things. And of course, Black people were free. They were free. They were no longer required to be slaves, although it took a while to get out of that. We're still trying to get away from that. But for those of us, and this is about all colors, not just, Blacks, but all races, all backgrounds, and so forth. There are some of us who get ourselves into a position to get ahead and go to a much higher place, if you will, than others do. And that'll cause envy. And it's not just envious of necessarily Black people, for that matter, but it can create problems for other, ethnic groups. Could be a gender thing as well. That can play into it. And so how do you combat that, though? Or how do you come up with, something to cause that to dissipate? The way you do it, I think, is by folks who do have, not to forget where you came from, and also exercise good manners, be sensitive, be courteous. I told you about the story the other night, talking with the young man up there at the restaurant. And so I have to catch myself at that, because I know there are times I think that people have said to me that I was lucky. I don't think I was lucky. My parents worked hard, I worked hard, but that's okay. I can live with that if folks say that I was lucky. But for those who really haven't maybe aspired or gotten to the places where they would like to be, because they say, you know, I'm here now, and it wasn't meant to be this way for me. I wanted to be in a better place. And when they lose hope with that or give up on that, oftentimes they will find one of those groups that becomes sort of a group that wants to go after what others have or take away from others what they have by whatever means possible, which is pretty sad. So we all have to be cognizant of that. We could all fall into that kind of category depending on our circumstances. But regardless of how bad the circumstances are, we still are all human beings. I think we all need to learn how to appreciate one another, and of course, love and faith. My faith plays a big role in my life. I know that. I ask the Lord every day to let me be a blessing to whomever I encounter. It's tougher to do that some days than it is others, you know. So I can kind of relate to how people might go there, but that's not to say that we give up on it. It's something we all have to work, and we have to work together to make it a better place for all of it. Because to me, and the bottom line is that, you know, life is about togetherness, and living is about forgiveness. And so that's something I came up with years ago. I started believing that, and I really do, because we all make mistakes. We all can be envious of one another, but that's not the way to go. In due time, I think we all can get there and get to a better place, and I hope that is true for all of us. I've said enough. I think I ought to leave it right there. So,
Thank you for that. So another audience question came in, and I think it kind of underlines what we've been talking about, but it shows also a real desire, I think, to understand these terms. And so somebody asked, what is the difference between systemic racism and white privilege? And before you all answer that beautifully, I do just want to put a plug in for the book, and maybe Kara could type it, the Me and White Supremacy book by Layla Saad, which is, I probably totally butchered her name, I apologize for that, but the idea that that white folks can do a lot of this learning and working through that book, you know, on their own time. But that said, this is a really important question. What's the difference between systemic racism and white privilege?
Did she give you a definition of white supremacy in the book?
She really does. She gives a ton of definitions. The other book that I think does a lot of definitional work is Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. That's the title. Stamped is a great book too, but How to Be an Anti-Racist goes through a lot of definitions. But yeah, the Me and White Supremacy book works through, I remember Perci was talking about stereotypes earlier, but it talks about stuff like cultural appropriation, anti-Blackness, you know, the problem with racist stereotypes, and definitely talks about what white supremacy is, what systemic racism is, how that's different from individual action, what white privilege is. So there are so many just wonderful, amazing resources, and I hope that people will use the library website to do that deeper dive in. But I am curious how you all read white privilege versus systemic racism.
I'd like to take a stab at this one.
Sure.
I had the privilege of being able to teach on this for a number of years in my second job after college. And I think what was really helpful for me was to understand the definition of racism versus the definition of like discrimination and, you know, all of these other terms that are coming here. So in short, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time being the voice, right? But systemic racism is saying that there is a system of oppression. There is a system set in place that is racist. And racism in itself is using power in order to keep another group of people, another race of people, from being able to access something, whether it be, I don't want to say rights, but that's the whole reason why we had to have the civil rights movement, is because we had a systemic racism problem, okay? The difference between systemic racism, and I'm sure somebody else will do a great job of going deeper into a deeper dive into systemic racism, but the difference between systemic racism and privilege says you are not the one who is in control of the racism and all of that that's going on in our country. Privilege says you woke up being given the skin that you're in. And the skin that you're in, if you are a white person, there is privilege that you were born with that allows you to walk into rooms without having to think about certain things that people who without white skin have to think about on a daily basis. So instead of going into a deeper dive into that, because I'm sure, again, the other two fellows here are going to do a good job of that, I'm going to explain it from the perspective of a friend of mine who said he was a left-hander. He was left-handed, and he walked into a restaurant, and he said that every time he walks into a restaurant, he has to think about his placement at the table so that he's not constantly worried about what other people are going to say about how he's moving his arm while he's trying to eat. And so us being right-handed, we have a certain privilege where we don't have to think about the placement at the table, our placement at the table, that we don't think about it, because this is just from the world, the way that the world, kind of the construct of our world and the way that we live in a right-handed society. And so left-handers constantly have to think about how they are going to make everybody else in the room comfortable with themselves or with them. So that was his awakening to understanding white privilege. So he understands that his privilege of having white skin means that he does not have to worry about whether or not he is making people in the room comfortable with his presence, because the skin that he was given just affords him the opportunity to operate within our society without having to worry about certain things. There are a few resources that I think are also good for this. There's a book called The Invisible Knapsack, and it talks about white privilege. There's a man, you can go online and find a lot of resources that interviews and lectures that he gives. His name is Tim Wise, and he does a phenomenal job of discussing white privilege, what that looks like, and how to break that down and how to understand it. And then he goes another step further and says, okay, now that you're aware of your white privilege, let's get beyond the white guilt that you feel, and let's do something with this privilege. This is how you can act. This is how you can move with this privilege. But that's it. I'm going to stop there. I hope that broke it down.
That was really good.
Yeah,
I never heard of
I
it
agree.
explained like that. That was I'm definitely stealing that. That was good. But I'm gonna be real brief on the systemic racism, because for me it's just the way. There's only one way I can really think of it, to explain it right now, and it's just, I mean, it's sort of piggybacking off of what you said about our society and the way things are set in place. Doesn't mean laws or anything. There's not laws against lefties, but it's just the way our society works, the way, computer mice are built, keyboards, just a lot of the little things you can think of that, might not physically harm you or do anything like that, but you just have to, go about it a different way. So the system that is set in place to how we live, how we earn money, how we are educated, everything that you can possibly think of, the backbone of a human and the the experiences we have in this life, I believe there's a system just set in place to where it just lends itself. You have to go against the grain to, I guess, to break free of the system. And there's a certain ways. There's going to, and you can typically hear about this, entertainment, sports, and stuff like that, that you don't completely break free of the system because you're always viewed a certain way. But it's just the way things are set up in our society, through education and all that, and it's just set up for people of color or people that aren't white. It is just set up to not benefit us. It benefits whites. Now, I would say we don't have to have a system that benefits colors more or black people more. I just feel like it goes back to the analogy with the pies that Chynna used earlier. It's just, we all want a system where you don't have to, overcome certain things to be successful. You just, it's just something you have to work hard, study, do that, the typical things to get to succeed. You shouldn't have to go through different hurdles to get to where you want. The track on each side should be the same. And I feel like it's like a track meet. White people are starting in lane 1, but the finish line is not a staggered track. It's just straight, and they're starting in lane 1 ahead of everybody. And that's the best way I could put it.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that real quick, there is, I think there are very clear ways to recognize systemic racism that are happening right now in 2020. So not to get political, but the way that we call it gerrymandering has, and I'll break that down. If you look online, there are these very heartwarming stories of the old Black woman who rode the bus sat on a bus for 4 hours so that she could get to a polling station so she can vote early. That's not very heartwarming to me, because what that says is she has not been given a polling location in her community that makes it easy access for her to go to the polls. We are finding that in areas that are heavily populated with minorities, specifically in more rural communities, there are fewer polling stations set there because there's this idea that they might vote a certain way. And so we are going to make that harder for them to get to a polling station than it would be for somebody who might vote a different way. And so I see that even in my community. We have a lot more polling station options in our more affluent areas than we do in our areas that are not so affluent. Then you have what happened in the primaries for a lot of places where when the polling stations were supposed to close, you still had a line of people on the highway trying to get in to make their voice heard, to be able to vote, but they locked the doors on them because they said, we're done at this certain time. Well, that's not fair. If you took away all of the polling stations that they could go to and you left them one spot and they're still in line, you are supposed to leave that door open until every last person has walked through. If they were already in line, then you have to let them in. And so it was a way to try to keep it was a voter suppression. And so that's a way that we see systemic racism happening right now, voter suppression, so that we can be able to kind of shift the power where we want it to be. So I think that's just one way that we could look at how systemic racism works. Even just now in 2020, we're seeing it still to this day.
What was that term you used?
Gerrymandering.
Okay.
And that's the term that it talks about how townships and if you look at a map of zoning and how they determine where they're going to place the polling stations, or what areas will get what station, or a lot of times they will move and shift as you watch the affluence move and shift, where the money goes. You see that they switch around where they're going to put the opportunities, I guess, to be able to influence elections.
That reminds me of how lawyers choose jurors, I guess. How they kind of, can manipulate it. So that's how I look at that.
Rex, did you want to weigh in on this question?
Yeah, and I'll try to keep this short. Systemic racism, with a very clear example here, I'll try to use, with Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey. Jackie Robinson being the first, black to play Major League Baseball in the modern era. Well, if you've seen the movie 42, it starts off very clearly. There's 400 white guys playing baseball, and then finally when that changed, there was 399 white guys playing baseball and one black man. Okay, well, white guys didn't have to worry about competing against black guys. That in itself is a form of, the white privilege. They didn't have to worry about competing against those guys because the blacks had their own leagues and everything, and let them have them, But Branch Rickey, being a part of the system where the systemic racism existed, made a difference for one person. And what I want to say is that with regard to systemic racism, or within a system, the system will not does not necessarily take care of people, only to a certain degree. When it comes to advancement and moving into higher places and positions of influence for individuals, it takes a person of pretty much great influence to make a difference for even one person or for a few people. And Branch Rickey did that in baseball. And then when Jackie Robinson came in, of course, if he had failed, well, it'd have been a setback for a while for blacks to ever probably play in Major League Baseball. But Branch Rickey was very smart about how he went about doing that. So the systemic racism and the white privilege, it is there. It does exist. And it's something that we all have to really fight to overcome. I experienced that early on in the Air Force when I went into '67. That was only 20 years after the executive order was given by President Truman to integrate the services. But while I was in there 30 years, I watched the Air Force grow up and mature, and not much diversity in the officer ranks there, and not a lot of rank even with the enlisted members. In fact, there was only one general officer, and when I went in, all the services had only about 28 colonels. Well, today there are many colonels and a number of black generals, female and male for that matter. And so progress is made, and it is made through the system, but it does take folks who are leaders of influence to help make a difference with that. Influential people in communities can make a difference, and they do make a difference. I can speak for a long time about folks who had an impact on my life here in Dover. My Little League baseball coach was a big influence on me, and that's one of the places where you see what I call systemic goodness. You can find that in some places like in sports, education, and some other areas. That's a good thing, but there is this evil side of it also that plays into systemic activities and behavior.
Real quick,
I think I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm so glad you said something about Little League Baseball, because on the side, I just sent a text to my mother saying, please let Dad know he needs to talk to Percy about working together to take over the Little League baseball in little known fact, Percy, my dad played in minor league baseball. So
Oh.
and he's got a pretty mean pitch that he cannot wait to teach to somebody, a grandchild or something, that has struck out.
Well, you should tell your dad. Well, you tell your dad that I said to get started. I'm sure I'm probably older than him, and I say that with great respect because I played a lot of baseball and softball.
Yeah,
and,
he used to coach for Little League. He
I
was
did
my
too.
Little League coach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I coached my sons up until they were like 16, 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they were the only black child on the team.
Yep.
You know, and that says something. That says something also.
Yeah.
You know, but I got along well with the other parents and so forth, and took advantage to do that when some of them really didn't feel like they had what it took to be a good coach or whatever. And even when I wanted to give it up, they still wanted me to do it. And so I did it a few more years, you know. So all that plays into this, what we're talking about here. And the thing I've learned over the years is that we have a lot of things in common. You know, if we could sort those out and then sift through those things and talk with each other about them, it would make this diversity thing a lot easier to talk about, and it would make our lives a lot better in general.
Well, you know, your questions, I had an order that I was going to ask them in, but the things you're saying are making me change my order. And so that last group of answers made me feel hopeful that yes, systemic racism is here, it's real, it's a problem, but there are, and white privilege can be a problem for sure. But there are ways that people can use the privileges they have to actually speak back, fight back, and do anti-racist actions. And so I wanted to ask, what actions do you think each of us could take on a daily basis to fight back, to be anti-racist?
On a daily basis, I would say just use good manners and be courteous, because the opportunity to make the impact that you want to make often comes after a period of time. Sometimes there'll be a season where you can make a big difference, and other times there just may be a moment that you can make a big difference. I'll give you an example, and I'm going to talk about the YMCA here in New Philly. I was looking at the number of folks on that big board they have with all the pictures and all that stuff, and I kept going down through there looking to see if there was any black children in there, because I grew up, the YMCA was right around the corner from where I lived on Tuscarawas, okay, in Dover. And finally, when I got to the end of it, I looked and I saw, well, I think she's still the director of the YMCA. I believe it's an African-American lady. I mean, that speaks volumes, you know, because
Tiffany
I knew
Fox.
the guy who ran, pardon?
Tiffany Fox, sorry to interrupt.
Okay, yeah, but I knew Mr. Patton and Mr. Doerr, who ran the YMCA when I was a kid there, you know, and we did go into the Y and so forth. There was sometimes we would go in and we could swim free, you know, certain times in the afternoon, you know. But to see that young lady's picture there as being the director of the YMCA spoke volumes to me, because somebody had to hire her. And that says something for the folks who did that. So there are good things that do happen. Oftentimes, we don't necessarily promote those as much as we should, because of some of the bad things that happen. You know, the bad things you see in the news most of the time. You know, the good news stories and things you don't always get to. But that's something we could do to help with diversity. Now, I'll say this also. The Times Reporter, I think, has always been pretty good about, you know, showing what blacks and women have done within our county, and maybe some of it when we've left, you know, they told stories about us. I know the Air Force had something called the Hometown News Release, And every time one was sent to Dover, they always put it in the paper. And my mother and dad loved that. And they would get comments from other people in the community about, about their son Rex and so forth. Well, Percy, same thing with him. And I think that is good stuff, and so there's this shuffle between good and evil. if I will, I'm being very direct here now. There's this shuffle between good and evil. And what we have to do is we have to stay on the good side of it and make it work. And there's times when we have to think about what we're going to say before we say it. Not only, people of color, but people who, white people as well. So we have to think about it before we say it. And if we say the wrong thing or whatever, then we ought to come out and say, you know what, I didn't say that right, or it didn't come right, and I'm sorry or whatever, because that's all part of it too. That plays into it too. And so, listen, I'm glad to be back in Dover. I mean, I like living in New Albany. It's a nice town and stuff, but I'm glad to be back in Dover. And it's a little different from being in Columbus. There's a lot more people in Columbus. There's much more diversity because there are a lot more people of color down in that large city. You don't see that here in Dover like you did when I was growing up. When I was growing up in Dover, there were many more blacks in Dover at the time, and so at least from what I can see now. So, but anyhow, the white supremacy and the white privilege, that is something that exists, and I think we've been working on it for a long time, and we just have to keep working on it. And we can all do our part. Whenever the moment occurs or whenever the season is there, we have to do it. And even when the season's not there, for us who are Christians and people of faith and want to do the right thing, we have to do what we can do and be courage. Be of good courage, strong and of good courage. That's what the Lord told Joshua to do, was to be strong and to be of good courage. And we all have to do that in order to make this a better place for all of us to live and grow. I've said enough, so you got more questions.
Thank you.
I would say that to use your, can you clarify the question just to be sure I'm answering this?
Sure. It's just, what action can each of us take to combat racism or to be anti-racist every day?
Thank you. So some of the simple actions that I ask of my students who ask me this question, to staff who ask me this question, even some of my friends. Number one, if you look at the people around you as family, you're willing to care for them as family. So there's a difference between saying that, I love all people. It's not a big deal. I care about everybody. I'm a good natured person. I got a good heart. When you say something like that, I have a hard time believing it if your actions don't match it. And so what I try to do is I try to look at people as if they are my family. So if I believe, so it doesn't matter. Here's the thing about family. I'm trying not to go too, because I try to talk about this in a viewpoint from my faith, because I tend to talk, I work at a Christian college, so we tend to talk about our brothers and sisters in Christ. But I'm just going to take that out of it and in general say, if I look at you as my family, it doesn't matter how angry, how upset I get with you, I can never actually cut you out because you are my family. And so when you're hurting, I hurt because you are my family. So if you have this idea that the people around you, no matter what they look like, they are a part of your family, you then change how you interact and how you engage and how you feel for those people. And they no longer become an outsider. They become somebody that it's important to you, that their well-being matters, right? And so that goes back to something that even Rex said back in our first discussion, where he said, just say hi. I can't tell you how many times I come back to visit, and I'll go to Walmart or Drug Mart or something, and people look at you, but they don't say hello. I know you see me. Like, you clearly see me because you can't take your eyes off of me. So why don't we just say hi and keep talking? You know, it is not that difficult to just be kind. And if I feel like you are my family, when I see something, I will say something. But if I don't think you are my family and I watch you go through something, or I see you going through something, I will not say, I won't speak up, because you're not important to me, because I don't see you as part of my family. So a simple act of caring for people the same way you would care for yourself, the same way you would care for your family. When you see something, say something. That's another easy thing. Don't walk past injustice. If you have a voice, use it. Another thing, don't just have quiet side conversations with people that you know have experienced injustice. It does nothing to have these private conversations, but then to go back into public and do nothing, no action. That hurts almost worse than inaction in general. So using your voice and even if I'm not in the room, even if there is no person of color in the room, but you hear something that is not right, to speak up, to learn to educate other people, to call out when you hear something that's not right, and to correct it. Engage people in conversations, I think, is another easy way to combat this. Let's have dialogue. And dialogue means that we both have a say in this right now. We're not fighting each other. We're not saying you're wrong. We're just saying, let's talk about it. And then maybe even talk about why it evokes such emotion when we are talking about race. Let's go there. Why do I feel the way that I feel when we're talking about this? And finally, one of the things that I try to tell people is, don't be so afraid of making a mistake, because your intentions are what matters. So yeah, you might say the wrong thing, but as Rex said, it's okay to just backtrack a little bit and say, you know what, that didn't come out the way that I had hoped it would. Or, you know what, excuse my ignorance, you know, or I appreciate you correcting me because I didn't know any better. It's okay. People know when your intentions are pure. When your intentions are right, it's okay to have that conversation with someone, you know? So that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah. Percy, did you want to jump in?
I mean, for me, it's like I think I even alluded to this earlier. It's just a part of my nature to just speak to people, be cordial, and I think that's just what I learned growing up because of the people that, you know, poured into me daily, and my parents and coaches. That's just what I was taught. But on the other hand, I feel like you can learn, you know, bad habits from people. But at the end of the day, you know, once you are old enough to make your own decisions, I feel like you can't really use that as an excuse anymore. And I feel like I mean, for me, and it appears like for Rex and Chynna as well, for me, it doesn't take much effort. It takes more effort in me to hold a grudge, to be angry, and it just doesn't come natural to me. So it's always a point of mind you never know what you can do for somebody's day. You might think it's something small by saying hello. Like if you're just in the store and people say hello to you. Now, for me, it's a little bit different around here. But if it's somebody who doesn't even know who I am and I don't know who they are, just saying hello, even over the phone, for me, I just think it's fun if I'm speaking to someone I don't know. I just think it's, you know, there's an opportunity to brighten someone's day and you never know what you can do. And I always focus on making positive impacts in people's lives. So, to me, it just doesn't seem, it just takes a lot of energy to want to bring people down. I don't think it's worth it.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think actually this feels a little related to something that that Rex stated directly, which is that it does seem like it's whiter here in Dover, New Philly than it did when he grew up. And so there was a question from the audience that says, representation is important. How do you think a community like Tuscarawas County could attract more diversity to our area, knowing that right now, at least, it feels very heavily white?
That's a good question. There are folks who've grown up in Dover, people of color who seeking higher places to go. You know, they've gone off to college, educated. Well, coming back to Dover to try to get a job, you know, that might be commensurate with your college education, whatever, is a little tough. For example, in my case, you know, they don't have an Air Force base here in Dover, Ohio. They're probably not going to build one here in Dover, Ohio. And so the Air Force was really a good opportunity for me. So I left home. But it is nice to be back here. Perhaps the school system could look into that. Maybe folks who would want to teach school. I don't know how many people of color they have teaching school in Dover or whatever. But there are other organizations that could, you know, that could look at that and make an effort to do that. And I'm not just saying to go find somebody to bring them in just because they're a person of color, because they might not be, you know, suited for the job or for the work. It has to be somebody that can do the work, or who's going to be a part of the organization and work well with the organization. I mean, I wouldn't advocate just bring somebody in because they're a person of color. I wouldn't do that. I mean, if I were the only Black person in Tuscarawas County, I think I would still be able to find a way to get along well with folks and do well. But I'm that type of person. I'm a hopeful person and optimistic, and my faith is very strong. So I believe, you know, wherever I go, the good Lord's already there. So I'm in good hands. So, but you could, you know, we could look at things like that if folks want to do that. And there are businessmen and women here who have organizations who could consider things like that. Major corporations are doing that now. I hear them talking about it on the news and so forth. You know, for example, many years ago, back when I was in college, before college and stuff, seldom did you see Black newscasters and so forth. Very seldom. But nowadays, they're there. You know, and in other walks of life, you know, you have Black CEOs, Black leaders in the military, religious organizations. So it is possible to do it, and it, like I said, it takes some folks of influence sometimes to make that difference.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I think I'll stop there.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say something.
Go ahead. No, I said I think I'll stop there. So go ahead. Yeah.
I think with anything, any way to attract anyone in general, what it's going to take is to build the economy in that area. And I think, you know, one of the reasons I did not come back is because there's just no opportunity for me. There's no opportunities there, unless, I mean, I'm sure I could start my own nonprofit, or I could, you know, try to start all over again. And, you know, I could do that if I wanted to, but there really is no draw for me personally. And not that it's about money, but the amount of money that I would make here in Fort Wayne versus the amount of money I would make back at home is it's a stark contrast. And I don't see a whole lot of economic development in that area. And so I think just in general, when you build the economic, you know, the amount of businesses, the amount of opportunities, that's what draws more people in. And then from there, you build the experiences, right? Because you don't want to become just a tourist town. So you want to build experiences for people who are coming here for work, right? So if we build opportunities for people to come and work here, and then say, hey, why don't you live here too? And if you live here, here are some of the things you can get plugged into while you're here. So that it's just kind of I'm watching is where I'm at. Fort Wayne is doing that right now. You know, they're working on that next stage, that next level of, we have to attract more people. We have to bring in more people. And so they're working on the experiences that people will have if they stay. You know, they're opening up more businesses. They're bringing in niche, you know, opportunities. And I think that's just what attracts people. I don't know that that's specific to people of color or not. I just think that for me, there just isn't a draw for me to come back, just because it, you know, economically, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I would say, I know my little brother's a good example for this, because he's not in Tuscarawas County, but he's in Starr County, but I know like being on part, because I'm part of the Dover Rotary. I know there's plenty of opportunities here in the medical field and stuff like that. But for me, you know, and my mother and a lot of my family grew up north where there is more black people. It's hard. I would say it's hard to, I guess, I don't want to say lure, that's a terrible word, to I guess make this a desirable place. And I kind of just, I don't know exactly what we could do, besides slowly but surely, I guess, increase the population that way, because I feel like people just want to be around, you know, people that look like them. And obviously in this area, it's not the case. Now, granted, I don't mind it, but I grew up this whole time here. So, you know, I'm not really uncomfortable being in Tuscarawas County. And that's just because I think of my personality. I'm very outgoing. I'll speak to anybody, like I just alluded to earlier. But most people who aren't kind of out there just seeking community and trying to contribute to a community, they kind of just want to, you know, better themselves, take care of their family. If they're not looking for safe environments and stuff like that, they're just like, look, I know there's opportunity here. There's a lot of people who look like me in this area. I grew up around this area. I kind of want to stay here. There isn't much pull to Tuscarawas County, I would say, for, you know, for people who look like us. But there's a sense of, I think the more we can, you know, bring a sense of community here, and that's my goal since I've come back, is to, you know, I just want to contribute like what people did for me when I was growing up. I just felt like this was home, and I just want to make it the best it can be. And I would love to see more people of color come to the area. And obviously we've had a big population of the brown people just coming. And I think at first I was a little, and if I'm being honest, I was a little skeptical, but I feel like that's just the human in me. But for the most part, you know, once you take a look back, you kind of take a 50, like a view from further back. You're not just worrying about what issues are you going to face today. You just look at the big picture. I think it's something that we as a people, at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter as much as a lot of people think it does. Or who's living here, what people look like that live here. I think it's just something that people are always going to pay attention to, but if you're looking to make an impact, I just want to help all people. I think it kind of overrides what they look like. And the organizations I approach, especially like the Y, like Rex was talking about, we don't care what you look like. We want a safe place for people, young people, and old people to come to so they can get their exercise, their well-being, and have a sense of community that way. I feel like I just said like I could not get out what I wanted to say. There was a lot of just,
Well,
But
you
at the end of the day, yeah.
so yeah, no, I mean, I obviously, the economy and the job opportunities, and if there's going to continue to be a brain drain, or if people are going to, you know, come back here after going to college, yeah, this isn't just a question, certainly, for people of color. This is a question for the area in general, and
Yeah,
people
it
are
is.
working on it.
It is.
I wanted to say that, and I can't remember which one of you, I apologize, said it earlier, but I think Rex, maybe it was you. You said everybody has some power and some influence. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about folks that have the ability to be on hiring committees and to make sure that job ads get put in a lot of places, and that it's not just about who you know, and, you know, making sure that our teachers that come in and get hired aren't always going to be products, you know, of the area, but maybe are going to come from other places as well. Those things can, I think, actually have a huge impact. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's hiring committees for sure, but it's also are the economic opportunities and the meaningful job opportunities there. And that's stuff that we should all want for all of us, as you know, I mean,
Yeah.
as Perci was saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, so thanks for, I feel like Chynna, you really put a fine point on that for me, and it really is true. There's a reason I didn't stay in the town that I grew up in either, and it had to do with economic opportunity. So yeah.
Nicole, one of the
Excellent. Thank
things,
you for that.
that you just said too, reminded me that I think even the businesses that exist there, if they're trying to attract more talent that might be more diverse, then they've got to work on a cultural competency plan.
Yeah.
That's very specific to the needs that would allow for the diversity to come, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what a lot of businesses lack, is the, you know, putting that together and saying, okay, this is our plan to become more culturally competent as an organization, as a business. This is how we are going to become more inclusive here in this area. And I mean, honestly, if that's not starting from the local government, then I don't see that really making much of a difference in the area. I don't know that it's happening. I don't know that it's not happening. But I do think that that is something that's really important. If you want to attract more diversity to your area, you've got to call in somebody who can strip it down and say, here's where you need to become more culturally competent in your you know, respective area. And we're working on that right now where I work, you know, have been part of that in a couple of other places too. We have to figure out the weaknesses that we have that are prohibiting us from becoming more inclusive.
Kent State is working on the same thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That was really interesting. So kind of going back to the question, maybe the question about making this a more desirable place to live, but also the question about what we can do daily for anti-racism is this question. Do you have allies in this area, whether they're individuals or organizations, and what qualities and characteristics do those allies have? And maybe if you can't think of allies that are here, maybe some advice about how people could become, or how organizations could become allies. I feel like this might just kind of pull together some of the things we were just talking about, but it seems like a good place to jump in with that.
I would say first and foremost, and I think Rex would agree with me, but I would say the YMCA is probably one of the easiest answers for me, just because that it's been such a big part of my life, especially early on, and what my dad did, and just always bringing me at the Y. The Y for me was, if I wasn't in school, I was at the Y. Now I feel like times have changed a little bit, but you know, I think people don't understand all of what the Y is about. But hopefully, we can change that and get back to the way it used to be, where it was a place where you can feel safe and you feel comfortable dropping your kids there. If you had to do something, just drop your kids off and let them, jump in the pool, play basketball, racquetball, do whatever. And it doesn't feel the same way anymore, but I feel like they're on their mission to get back to that. And I feel like that's one of the biggest allies I have in the area, other than outside of churches.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that, Percy. The YMCA was
Uh-oh.
Is everybody losing Rex a little bit, unfortunately?
Yep.
I think he might be having some technical problems again.
Okay. Chynna, maybe if you have anything to say about that, then we can let Rex's microphone hopefully catch up.
Downtown Dover.
Oh,
Hey.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can hear you now. Yes.
I can hear you guys. Can you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the YMCA was downtown Dover. It was closer to the school. So, and there were a lot more activities downtown as well. So, the younger people really did congregate at the YMCA quite often. I'm not sure that happens now with where it's located now. So, but the YMCA would be an ally. The Dover Library was always an ally for my brothers and me. Even the old Victorian house that was the original library, just right outside the back door of the Memorial Hall. I mean, if it was raining, we were in there. If it wasn't raining, we was down over the hill playing baseball. So that was an ally for me. Little League Baseball was an ally for me, or growing up playing ball in Dover was an ally. We had favorite places we hung out, like the Goshen Dairy, some of the best ice cream in the world.
Yeah, the Goshen Dairy.
Made there. And of course, Eiler is still there. That was one of, it wasn't really a hangout, but you could go in there and grab a cold root beer and then, for a nickel, and then you could go on home, Yeah. And people that I worked for were allies, like the people I mowed lawns for. The one lady I mowed lawns for, she would insist that I eat a sandwich and drink a glass of milk after I mowed her lawn. And I remember that. That was up on North Worcester. And some of the offices that I cleaned and stuff, that was was a good thing, because people knew me, they knew my parents. And so that was a good feeling. I felt safe growing up in Dover. I did. That was a long time ago, though. Yeah.
Yeah, if I go back in time, I can identify I had a strong friendship group, and all of those families felt safe. The library, I'm a little bit impartial, or I'm not impartial, I should say, because my mom works there.
Yeah, your mom was there.
And so that was always the stopping point for me, from 8th grade on. After school, I could stop there, and obviously it's a lot of different people now than it was when I was younger, but they were all safe, and loving and warm, and it was a home. It was another home away from home to be at the library at that time. The Y, spent time at the Y. And I think what's important to note about that is that the Y is a national organization. They're specifically designed to be there for youth to grow up in a safe environment. So this is something that it's a model that's all across the country. And I'm so thrilled to know that it did it well in a small town like, New Philly and Dover, in Tuscarawas County. I'm so thrilled to know that it didn't matter that that it was a small town, or, that they still executed their job well, and that they're still doing it. But when if I fast forward to today, I don't live there anymore. And, that's part of the reason why I have never felt 100% connected to Tuscarawas County is because I was a transplant. Our family came there when I was 5 years old. I had already moved when I was an infant out to Denver, Colorado, spent 5 years of my life in Denver, Colorado, and then was transplanted in New Philadelphia. And there is something that I believe, you know, because of the calling that God has put on my heart, that I'm not called to feel at home yet. There's that he's called me to get up and go for certain reasons. And so I don't fault Tuscarawas County for that. But I just have never felt at home in Tuscarawas County. And like I said, I don't fault T County for that whatsoever. But when I go back to see my parents, and that's pretty much it. You know, I'm not actively seeking allies in the area. Now, what I can say is that I do have plans in the future to create a scholarship program for minority young women back at home, because I want to create access at some point when I have the means. I want to create that access. I want to create the mentorship that I never had. I want to be able to feed back into a community that, whether I felt at home or not, it was still the community that raised me. And so eventually I will come back and I will find those allies, and, you know, but at this very moment in my life, that's not where I'm feeding, you know, that's not where I'm currently focusing my energy. So.
Well, thank you all. I think I'm looking at the time, and I think we're nearing the end. And so I'm going to ask one last question. I think it'll take us home here, but I'm going to ask it also with the add-on that if there's something you really just feel like you need to say before you leave, I would, you know, then do that. Okay. But the last question is, what advice and suggestions do you have for teachers and or librarians in this primarily white region or other primarily white regions? You know, what can be done, what should be done in classrooms to help in the working against racism? And so it was a very specific question directed toward teachers and librarians. But again, I really am interested, as somebody who also teaches, what your answer is there. But I also want to invite you to just say any other final thoughts you feel like didn't get said.
I just want to say, just be intentional about connecting with your students. I know someone I just ran into named Kevin Billy talked about his coaching, and he thought he was a good coach, but his team didn't really advance until he started to get involved into knowing that person off the basketball court and just not knowing him as a player, but as a person. So I'm not saying the teacher has to, you know, get up in all the kids' business, but just be a resource for that kid, whether he's got a good home setting or not. Just be a resource for that child, no matter what they look like. It's up to you to be intentional about how you're leading the children. It's not just about what you teach them through the books, but about how your actions, and you can be an example for that child moving forward. I know I never really had a teacher except one that really intentionally made sure I was proud to be a Black person. But all the other teachers, they never really concentrated on race, but I can tell they poured into me daily and wanted to see something positive come out of my life. And it was an intentional effort that I noticed from every one of my teachers, even though they all taught differently. And even one of the teachers that was most hard on me, I kind of responded to that best because it resembled my father. But just be intentional about how you approach each student, knowing that it's not a cookie cutter situation. Different kids come from different backgrounds. So you got to show them attention in different ways. And that's part of, you know, mastering your craft. And hopefully you have a desire to do that. And the only other thing I want to say that I think is important that I just kind of want to get off is there's one thing that I think, and we touched on this first time, but I just want to, slam it home if people weren't available the first time. We are people. We all face adversity in different ways. Do not shrug off other people's, their struggles in life because you might not know what it's like to struggle that way, or you might not think it's real. If there's a person telling you that they are struggling with something, or you can see it, be some form of positive energy in their life, and you never know what that can lead to. It's very important. And that's what I want to, I guess, leave it with.
Thank you.
I agree with that. Yes, I agree with that. And I don't have a whole lot that I could add to that. But being genuine, be genuine in dealing with all of those that you deal with, be even-handed. That was one thing I liked about my Little League coach. I mean, I was the only black kid on that Little League baseball team, and very even-handed. He didn't talk in a lot of hype and give us a lot of hoorah and stuff, but we played good baseball, and he was a good coach. And if he never laid blame on any of us, if we missed the ball or something like that, he'd just say, "Get it next time." Or if we struck out, he said, "You hit it next time." And it made us a better ball team. And in fact, I'm still friends with all of that. 6 of us graduated from high school together, and we're still friends. And in fact, we still get together in my parents' yard here once a year, our class. So all my high school classmates from Dover and we're still good friends, and we reach out to each other, communicate with each other, and can talk with each other. And that's a good thing. So being genuine is very important, and being even-handed with folks. And I took that into the military with me because as Chynna was talking about the importance of being a good leader, and your team is your family and stuff. And I had some big organizations, and I tried to treat them all the same. I would speak with them when I saw them. I'd say hi to them. I tried to get to know their name, even though sometimes there were thousands of people out there that was part of the organization. And if they knew me and came up and said something to me, I'd introduce myself and talk with them. And so that's very important. Just acknowledging the presence and dignifying their presence means not there, but any person's presence is very important. And Chynna talked about saying hi. When I said say hi to people, I'm old enough now, Chynna, that it doesn't bother me when people don't speak back to me. I say hi pretty much anyway, and I'll go on and I'll say, well, they missed an opportunity, And I'm a very grateful person. As you get older, you'll become more grateful, or you should become more grateful. So I'm just grateful to be around and to be in a position where I can say positive and uplifting things to people. So that's where I am, and that's where I want to get better at that. So that's all I have to say.
I love the last statement. I want to get better at that, because that's exactly what I wanted to close with is my advice to teachers and librarians is that you have to remember that we are all continual learners, or that we should be. And none of us have ever reached the pinnacle of knowledge. And so if you are continuing to teach someone, you should continue to learn what to teach them. And so add more to your toolkit, add more to that bag, that tool bag. So go online, look at the resources, and make sure that your voice is not the only voice that is teaching. Find other ways to incorporate learning into the classroom so that other voices are heard, and you can take a seat. Go ahead and show a video, engage your learners in different ways. Find them more information and engage them in dialogue, and show them something that gets their mind thinking about other cultures, and even remembering that a lot of our curriculum is very European focused. And when I say European, I don't mean European as in what Europe is now, but European as in colonizing, you know. And so when we talk about other cultures, sometimes you might forget that you've got a representative of a culture sitting right in your room, and you're teaching them about their own culture, which sometimes the information that you're giving them out of a textbook may not be all as accurate as we would like for it to be. And so I know that there are limitations because there are certain, I know how the code works with education, and you have to hit certain marks, and I feel for educators because there's so little time to be able to really dive into the work that you want to dive into. I know that, but as much as you possibly can, continue to be a learner and find creative ways to bring other voices to the table when you're educating your youth.
If I could hitchhike on what Chynna was just saying there about bringing more alternatives in to educate your youth and so forth, I would suggest to librarians and teachers that with all the different ethnic groups and backgrounds of people who are in the media, you know, the media, they provide ample opportunities to show little different cultures and so forth, and you don't have to turn it into a whole hour or a session, but show different channels, because at home their parents may watch locked in on just one channel or something, or they get their news or whatever, and that in itself, you know, starts to build these habits and the thought processes for some folks. Now, so if the teachers show different things, you know, the children can teach your parents as well. I remember when our parents used to ask us if they were saying things the right way or if they pronounced it the right way, because my dad had a third grade education, my mother 8th grade. In fact, she got her GED after we all finished high school. But they would ask us if they were spelling something correctly or if they were saying something correctly. So it's kind of a two-way thing there with the family, you know, because the children can help the parents become more diverse as well. And I ran into some of that in the military with regard to folks who didn't want their children in the military, but once they got to know our recruiter, then they brought their other 2 children in and put them into the Air Force. So it's an education process, and that's what we've all kind of, Chynna and Perci and I have all talked about. You know, it's about learning and educating each other so that we do get to a better place. Thank you.
This was such a pleasure. I've jotted down ideas. I've rethought things. I have enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you all so much for answering those questions tonight. I really appreciate it. And Virginia and Kara and everyone else on your committee, thanks for inviting me.
This was, excuse me, amazing. Thank you all so much. Wonderful dialogue, conversations, and even I want to thank the audience. You guys asked some wonderful questions, and yeah, it was just this was very awesome, and I just want to thank everyone. I want to remind you that the video will be posted to the library's YouTube channel, as well as the links that Kara has been providing in chat. We do want to mention that on November 17th at 6:30, Nicole will be presenting a program at the library sharing more information about anti-racism resources. So you want to make sure that you log in to register for that. And so with that, I don't think I have anything else to say. Everybody have a wonderful evening, and thank you again very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a nice evening.
Good night.